All right, guys, so we are going to finish your assessment for Intro to Lit. This is the second reading and the second set of questions. There is another video that reads the first reading called the 1928 Packard and the questions for those. So if you have not done that already, when you finish with the second reading and the second set of questions, you can click on the link for the first video so that you could get that as well, okay? Again, please have open Learner's Dictionary. You go to learnersdictionary.com so that as I am reading, you can look up words that you don't know. So that would mean you would pause the video and you would look up words that you don't know, okay? All right, the directions say, read the selection and choose the best answer to each question. Then fill in the answer on your answer document. We've got a little note here. It says, in Bengali tradition, children are given two names at birth, an informal name used only at home, and a formal name or good name used in public. In this excerpt, Gogol's parents, Ashoke and Ashima, want to give him a good name to use at school. This is called The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. There's a good reason Gogol doesn't want to go to kindergarten. His parents have told him that at school, instead of being called Gogol, he will be called by a new name, a good name, which his parents have finally decided on, just in time for him to begin his formal education. The name, Nikhil, is artfully connected to the old. Not only is it a perfectly respectable Bengali good name, meaning he who is entire, encompassing all, but it also bears a satisfying resemblance to Nikolai, the first name of the Russian Gogol. Ashoke had thought of it recently, staring mindlessly at the Gogol spines in the library, and he had rushed back to the house to ask Ashima her opinion. He pointed out that it was relatively easy to pronounce, though there was the danger that Americans, obsessed with abbreviation, would truncate it to Nick. She told him she liked it well enough, though later, alone, she had wept, thinking of her grandmother who had died earlier in the year, and of the letter, forever hovering somewhere between India and America, containing the good name she'd chosen for Gogol. Ashima still dreams of the letter at times, discovering it after all these years in the mailbox on Pemberton Road, opening it up only to find it blank. So again, I'm going to pause quickly. If there were any words that you didn't know, maybe truncate, right? Maybe resemblance. If there are words that you didn't know, pause my video, type them in here to look them up to make sure that you get that as you're going through the rest of the reading. Okay? But Gogol doesn't want a new name. He can't understand why he has to answer to anything else. Why do I have to have a new name? He asks his parents, tears springing to his eyes. It would be one thing if his parents were to call him Nikhil too, but they tell him that the new name will be used only by the teachers and children at school. He is afraid to be Nikhil, someone he doesn't know, who doesn't know him. His parents tell him that they each have two names too, as do all of their Bengali friends in America and all their relatives in Calcutta. It's a part of growing up, they tell him, part of being a Bengali. They write it for him on a sheet of paper, ask him to copy it over 10 times. Don't worry, his father says, to me and your mother, you will never be anyone but Gogol. At school, Ashoke and Gogol are greeted by the secretary, Mrs. McNabb, who tells Ashoke to fill out a registration form. He provides a copy of Gogol's birth certificate and immunization record, which Mrs. McNabb put in a folder along with the registration. This way, Mrs. McNabb says, leading them to the principal's office. Candace Lapidus, the name on the door says. Mrs. Lapidus assures Ashoke that missing the first week of kindergarten is not a problem, that things have yet to settle down. Mrs. Lapidus is a tall, slender woman with short white blonde hair. She wears frosted blue eyeshadow and a lemon yellow suit. She shakes Ashoke's hand and tells him that there are 2 other Indian children at the school, Jayadev Modi in the 3rd grade and Rekha Saxena in 5th. Perhaps the Gangulis know them? Ashoke tells Mrs. Lapidus that they do not. She looks at the registration form and smiles kindly at the boy, who is clutching his father's hand. Gogol is dressed in powder blue pants, red and white canvas sneakers, a striped turtleneck top. Welcome to elementary school, Nikhil. I am your principal, Mrs. Lapidus. Gogol looks down at his sneakers. The way the principal pronounces his new name is different from the way his parents say it, the second part of it longer, sounding like heel. She bends down so that her face is level with his and extends a hand to his shoulder. Can you tell me how old you are, Nikhil? When the question is repeated and there is still no response, Mrs. Lapidus asks, Mr. Ganguly, does Nikhil know English? Of course he does, Ashoke says. My son is perfectly bilingual. In order to prove that Gogol knows English, Ashoke does something he has never done before and addresses his son in careful, accented English. Go on, Gogol, he says, patting him on the head. Tell Mrs. Lapidus how old you are. What was that? Mrs. Lapidus said. I beg your pardon, ma'am? That name you called him, something with a G? Oh, that is what we call him at home only, but his good name should be, he nods his head firmly, Nikhil. Mrs. Lapidus frowns. I'm afraid I don't understand. Good name? Yes. Mrs. Lapidus studies the registration form. She has not had to go through this confusion with the other 2 Indian children. She opens up the folder and examines the immunization record, the birth certificate. There seems to be some confusion, Mr. Ganguly, she says. According to these documents, your son's legal name is Gogol. That is correct, but please allow me to explain that you want us to call him Nikhil. That is correct. Mrs. Lapidus nods. The reason being? That is our wish. I'm not sure I follow you, Mr. Ganguly. Do you mean that Nikhil is a middle name or a nickname? Many of the children go by nicknames here. On this form there is a space. No, it's not a middle name, Ashoke says. He is beginning to lose patience. He has no middle name, no nickname. The boy's good name, his school name, is Nikhil. Mrs. Lapidus presses her lips together and smiles. But clearly he doesn't respond. Please, Mrs. Lapidus, Ashoke says, it is very common for a child to be confused at first. Please give it some time. I assure you he will grow accustomed. He bends down and this time in Bengali, calmly and quietly asks Gogol to please answer when Mrs. Lapidus asks a question. Don't be scared, Gogol, he says, raising his son's chin with his finger. You're a big boy now. No tears. Though Mrs. Lapidus does not understand a word, she listens carefully, hears that name again. Gogol. Lightly in pencil, she writes it down on the registration form. Ashoke hands over the lunchbox, a windbreaker in case it gets cold. He thanks Mrs. Lapidus. Be good, Nikhil, he says in English, and then, after a moment's hesitation, he is gone. When they are alone, Mrs. Lapidus asks, Are you happy to be entering elementary school, Gogol? My parents want me to have another name in school. And what about you, Gogol? Do you want to be called by another name? After a pause, he shakes his head. Is that a no? He nods, yes. Then it's settled. Can you write your name on this piece of paper? Gogol picks up a pencil, grips it tightly, and forms the letters of the only word he has learned thus far to write from memory, getting the L backward due to nerves. What beautiful penmanship you have, Mrs. Lapidus says. She tears up the old registration form and asks Mrs. McNabb to type up a new one. Then she takes Gogol by the hand, down a carpeted hallway with painted cement walls. She opens a door, and Gogol is introduced to his teacher, Miss Watkins, a woman with hair in 2 braids, wearing overalls and clogs. Inside the classroom, it's a small universe of nicknames. Andrew is Andy, Alexandra Sandy, William Billy, Elizabeth Lizzie. It is nothing like the schooling Gogol's parents have known. Fountain pens and polished black shoes and notebooks and good names and sir or madam at a tender age. Here, the only official ritual is pledging allegiance first thing in the morning to the American flag. For the rest of the day, they sit at a communal round table, drinking punch and eating cookies, taking naps on little orange cushions on the floor. At the end of his first day, he is sent home with a letter to his parents from Mrs. Lapidus, folded and stapled to a string around his neck, explaining that due to their son's preference, he will be known as Gogol at school. What about the parents' preference? Ashima and Ashoke wonder, shaking their heads. But since neither of them feels comfortable pressing the issue, they have no choice but to give in. Now let's take a look at the questions. A quick reminder that your questions will show up on the right side of your screen, so you should be answering them in Illuminate in the website that you're taking the test on the right side of your screen, okay? Number 7, read these sentences from paragraph 3. She shakes Ashoke's hand and tells him that there are two other Indian children at the school, Jayadev Modi in the 3rd grade and Rekha Shena in 5th. Perhaps the Gangulis know them. These sentences imply that Mrs. Lapidus, A, has made assumptions about the Gangulis because they are Indian American, B, wants to reassure the Gangulis that Gogol will feel welcome among his Indian classmates, C, is familiar with the Indian naming traditions that the Gangulis follow, D, has worried about how the Gangulis will fit into the Indian American community at school. Pause this video, answer the question in Illuminate, and come back. Number 8. In paragraph 26, Ashoke can best be described as. So we need to go back to paragraph 26 and figure out how Ashoke is described. It says, he bends down and this time in Bengali, calmly and quietly, asks Gogol to please answer when Mrs. Lapidus asks a question. Don't be scared, Gogol, he says, raising his son's chin with his finger. You're a big boy now, no tears. So let's go back to the question. Ashoke can best be described as F, optimistic and irritable, G, caring and critical, H, compassionate and stern, J, insightful and authoritarian. Again, if there are words that you don't know, look them up at learnersdictionary.com. Pause my video, come back. Number 9. Which quotation foreshadows the ultimate decision to allow the boy to use the name Gogol at school instead of Nikhil? A. Though Mrs. Lapidus does not understand a word, she listens carefully, hears that name again, Gogol. Lightly in pencil, she writes it down on the registration form. B. Gogol looks down at his sneakers. The way the principal pronounces his new name is different from the way his parents say it, the second part of it longer, sounding like heel. C. She bends down so that her face is level with his and extends a hand to his shoulder. Can you tell me how old you are, Nikhil? D. He thanks Mrs. Lapidus. Be good, Nikhil, he says in English, and then, after a moment's hesitation, he is gone. Y'all, I have to end this video because we are running out of time on this video, so I will make one more video with questions 10, 11, and 12, okay? So finish question number 9, end this video, and find the link for the third and final video for questions 10, 11, and 12.